You're listening to the Cornerstone Youth Podcast on YouTube.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great week. I'm doing good myself. I am back. We're recording this on a Tuesday of this week. We were off yesterday because of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I know all the kids were off of school, so you guys were out as well. So y'all got kind of a free day. So I hope you enjoyed that day and you got some much-needed rest and relaxation. And then you're back to the grind tonight or today at school. So we're gonna jump right into it. We've been talking about this new series that we started last week called Simple Math, and I'm excited. Last week we talked about addition. So what are the things that we need to kind of add to our life that God is telling us to add, that we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to add these things to our life. And we talked about, loving people, loving God, and delivering the Great Commission, which is going into every nation and telling people about Him. So we talked about that last week, which was really, really good. If you haven't listened to that, make sure you go check out last week's episode called Simple Math of Addition. This week we're starting on week 2. We are going to actually talk about, keeping with the simple math thing. We talked about it last week, how sometimes, as Christians, we kind of tend to overthink this whole Christianity thing and, make it more, we dive into the depth of theology and Christianity and what all these different things mean. And those are great things to do. And, if you dive into those, I'm happy for you and you can learn a lot. But we can't forget the simple things that God wants us to do. We can't overlook the commandments and the things that He wants us to do by overlooking that stuff to get into the deep stuff. And what He actually calls us to do is actually really, really simple. Loving God, loving people, and then delivering His message into the world. So what He actually wants us to do, this whole Christianity thing can be really, really deep, or it can be really, really simple. So that's kind of, we're taking a step back from the deep, from the depth of this religion and this theology, and we're going to kind of just look at the simplicity of it. So what are we adding to our life? And this week we're going to talk about subtraction. So what are some things that God is telling us that we need to subtract from our lives? And that's a pretty simple question to answer. I mean, you could really just answer it with one question. What does God want us to subtract from our lives? Sin. I mean, that's the easiest way to answer that question. He wants us to subtract sin. Sin is what separates us from Him. Sin is actually an archery term that means to miss the mark. So, when we sin, we miss the mark that God has set for us. And when we sin, we fall short of the glory of Him, and it separates us from God. And that's not what He wants. So, sin is the easy way to answer that, but we're not going to just answer it with the easy way. We're going to break it apart, and we're actually going to look a little bit deeper and a little bit harder at what that actually means. So there's actually a scripture in Proverbs that we're actually going to look at today where it actually shows you what God hates. Yeah, what He actually hated. It actually says it right in the verse, and we're going to read it here in a minute, that He actually does hate these things. So let's check that out. If you're opening your Bible, you're taking notes or whatever, it's Proverbs chapter 6, 16 through 19. All right, Proverbs chapter 6, 16 through 19. And I'm going to read it to you today in the Message version. I just like the way that it explains it. Usually I'm reading out of the CSB or Christian Standard Bible, but today I'm going to read it out of the Message version. I just like the way that it sounded. So let's read it together, and then we'll kind of dissect it and pull it apart a little bit. So Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 through 19, it says these things right here. It says, here are 6 things that God hates. See, right there, boom, right off the bat. This is what He hates. And one more that He loathes with a passion. So right there, you see that He means business, like right from the get-go. Like, I hate these things, and then there's one that I loathe with a passion. So what are the things that He actually hates? And, what is he talking about here? It says that He hate God. Here's 6 things that God hates, and one more that He loathes with a passion. It's eyes that are arrogant, a tongue that lies, hands that murder the innocent, a heart that hatches evil plots, feet that race down a wicked track, a mouth that lies under oath, a troublemaker in the family. And that's you read that, and that's That's a powerful list right there. You know, there's a lot going on in that list right there that are like, whoa, you know, I never could see myself doing those things, but you'd be shocked at how close we actually get sometimes. And so, you know, that's a pretty powerful list, and we may not fall under any of those, but he does still hate sin, and we all do that. So you may not, have eyes of arrogance or anything like that, but we still all sin. We still all fall short of the glory of God. So let's look at three things that we can pull from this verse or from this group of verse, and what can we pull from this to subtract from our lives, okay? So what are three things that we can subtract from our lives today? What are three things that we need to work on to subtract from our lives today? So let's take a couple minutes and let's dive into that. So number one is hate, okay? Hate. Proverbs 15, chapter 1 says this. It says, a gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath. A gentle answer turns away anger, but a harsh word stirs up wrath. We have to subtract hate from our vocabulary. That is a one word that we have to subtract the word hate from our vocabulary. You know, it's gotten to a point kind of in our world that if someone doesn't agree with us, or if someone is not in the same mindset, or if someone is not in the same group or friends, that we have to hate that person. I don't know where we got off track on this, or where it started to form through. So I mean, social media plays a big part in this, you know, where we can kind of hide behind a screen or hide behind an avatar and say whatever we want to. You know, and especially against people who disagree with us, you know, we can easily just bash them and hate on them. But we have to remove this word from our vocabulary, because God hates hate. You know, it's a simple way to say that, but he dislikes hate. He does not approve of hate. And, you know, we don't always have to agree. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. We don't always have to agree with people. You know, there are going to be people out there that think differently than we do, that feel differently than we do, that have different opinions on the things that we, you know, than different opinions than what we have. But that is no reason to hate somebody. That is no reason to dislike or bring hatred or bring words of hatred against somebody, regardless of their other religion, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of whatever. You know, I remember going back to high school. And like when I was in high school, there was really only one main high school in our city. And when I was, I think about 10th grade, they decided to open up another high school in the city. Like kind of like our city had gotten too big and we've gotten too many people, so they had to split the city up. So we were on the west side of the city, and then the other school was on the east side of the city. So they split the city in half basically. And for whatever reason, just because they were not us, we decided that we had to hate them. Like, they were the same people that went to our school last year, but just because they go to a different school now in the same city, we had to hate them. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. Looking back at it now, it was so ridiculous. But just because they didn't have the same school colors, just because they didn't have the same mascot, just because they didn't go to the same building, we had to hate them. And looking back on it now, it's like some of those people were like some of my really good friends, and we were, you know, just it was formatted that we had to hate that. Hate is something that we have to remove from our hate. We have to subtract the word hate and our hate for other people from our vocabulary. We have to love. We remove hate and we add love. That's God's command for us, and we have to live by that. Number 2 is fleshly desires. Another thing that we have to subtract from our life is fleshly desires. You know, Romans chapter 8, verse 7 says this. It says, the mindset of the flesh is hostile to God. Check that out. The mindset of the flesh is hostile to God because it does not submit to God's law. You know, it's funny. You know, Christianity is a religion that's not man-made. Okay, there's a lot of religions in our world that are created by man, and it even speaks to some in the Bible where like they've created an image or created an idol that was man-made. You know, a good example is the Israelites when they're walking in the wilderness. They take all their jewelry and all this gold and they form this calf. While Moses is away talking to God, he comes back and they've created this calf, this man-made image to worship. Well, Christianity and our love of God is not man-made. It's created by God. And Christianity isn't a man-made. It's not man-made because it actually goes against everything man wants to do. It goes against every fleshly desire. The things that he calls us to do go against everything that our fleshly desires want. And it's crazy to look at it like that. But Christianity actually goes against everything that man wants. Our fleshly desires. There's a verse that talks about we have to cast away, every fleshly desire, we cast it away. We flee from temptation. We flee from desires that are we die every single day to ourselves. That's what that's talking about. We die every single day to ourselves, and we pick up our cross and we follow him. So we have to die. Our fleshly desires have to die. We have to remove them. We have to subtract them from the equation, from our life. We have to remove them from what we're doing here. It's very important that we do these things. And it's easier said than done, and it's very important to look for help in this area, especially in areas where you may be blind or you may not necessarily see it, but it's important to have people around you that will tell you, hey, there's some things going on in your life that I see that you need to get right, or we need to subtract, or we need to kind of handle. So you need to have these people in your life that will tell you these things and help you subtract it from your life. So we talked about hate. We need to remove hate. We need to subtract hate from the equation. We need to subtract fleshly desires from our life. Number 3 is the last one, is earthly possessions. And in this one, I'm talking about idols, okay? Now, you may look at that and say, oh gosh, idols. There's no way I would ever worship, a golden calf or a statue of some other god. Like, I could never see myself worshiping that. And that may be true. The Bible speaks of these instances like this, but today you would never find yourself worshiping a golden calf. That may be true, but you will find yourself worshiping other things. And, Colossians chapter 3, verse 2 says, set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. And I think I want to touch on that for a second. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. See, not all earthly things are not all bad. Okay? Like, let's take technology into the equation for a second. Like your phone or an Xbox or a PS4. Those things aren't bad. They're not bad. They were not created for evil. But what happens is we twist these things to become gods. We twist these things to become, this is what we rely on. This is what we put our trust and our faith and our hope in, instead of what we're supposed to put our trust, hope, and faith in, which is God. These things, these earthly possessions, these earthly things take the place of God. And it's so easy to fall into one of these traps. And it can be anything. I mean, I just spoke on technology with phones and PlayStation 4s and 5s and Xboxes and all the things. But it could be anything. A hobby, soccer, it could be football, it could be band. If you're putting those things above Christ, then it's become an idol for you. Television, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, anything. If you're putting it above Christ, it's become an idol, and it needs to be dealt with. When they take the place of Christ, it's become, a thing that God hates. And we have to remove it. We have to get order, has to be restored, okay? There's an order to these things. I think a long time ago I got told, and y'all have heard me talk about this before, but I got told that, if Christ is not at the top of your list, he's not on your list. And that destroyed me, because at the time I was still living in the world. I was still doing whatever I wanted to, but I still wanted this relationship with Christ. And I could never see myself. It was going to be a struggle to get God back on top. And it was. It took a long time for me to get to that point. But once I heard that, it really destroyed me. And I think, nobody's perfect. Nobody's ever going to have Christ at the top of their list all the time. Things happen. Life happens. Life gets in the way. But if we're constantly checking ourselves and constantly reminding ourselves that God needs to be at the top of the list, then we're constantly evaluating, okay, is this thing taking the place of Christ? Is my cell phone taking the place of Christ? Is soccer, is football, is this person taking the place of Christ? We have to, in order to do that, you have to check yourself. You have to have daily evaluation, and you have to restore order. So today, this real quick, I wanted to get those things to you, what we can subtract from our life. First is hate. We got to subtract hate. This world is so full of hate right now, and everything that's going on with, racial tension and political tension and, everything that's going on. The last thing that we need to do as Christians is add to the hate. What we need to do is subtract the hate from our lives and add the love. That's what we need to do. Secondly, it's fleshly desires, those everyday demons that we have to battle. We have to take control of those. And third is earthly possessions and idols. We have to check ourselves every single day and make sure that we're not replacing Christ with something else. So let's work today to subtract things that pull us from God. And I want to leave you with this quote. It says, God is trying to subtract things from your life, not to harm you, but to protect you. He's not trying to take these things away from you to punish you or do these things. He's trying to help you, and he's trying to protect you and not harm you. And that's the way we need to look at this, is God's trying to help us, not harm us. Hey, you want to be caught up on everything that's happening at the CY? Make sure you're following us on Facebook at Cornerstone Youth South Haven and on Instagram at CY_South Haven. Make sure to give us a follow and check out our stuff.